Here is a cartridge that changed what Americans believed a handgun could do. It was not because a general ordered it. It was not because a government adopted it. It was because one man, a cattle rancher from Idaho, with a burned hand and no high school diploma, decided the men around him were wrong, and he was going to prove it in print until they admitted it. The caliber he fought for is still in production, still carried, still the answer when someone asks what you bring when an animal weighs half a ton and the shot might go wrong. It is in gun shops from Alaska to Texas. It is in the holsters of guides who cannot afford to be wrong about what they carry. Most people who carry it have never heard his name. Before you can understand Elmer Keith, you need to understand the world he was arguing against. That world had already made up its mind. In 1935, American handguns meant one thing: the 1911 in .45 ACP. The service revolvers in .38 Special, cartridges designed to stop a man. The argument was settled. Nobody serious was asking for more. Keith was asking for more. He had been asking since he was a young man, guiding elk hunters into the Idaho backcountry, carrying a revolver on his hip the way other men carried a pocket knife, not for show, because the country he worked in had animals that did not stop when you asked them to, and the cartridges everyone agreed were adequate were not adequate. He had seen what adequate looked like when it failed. He had tracked wounded animals through country that did not make that easy. He had learned the difference between a cartridge that worked on paper and a cartridge that worked when it mattered. Keith was born on March 8, 1899, in Denton, Montana. Practical in the way that open country forces a man to be practical. You learn what works and what does not. You learn it personally, expensively, sometimes in the dark. In the summer of 1911, he was 12 years old and on the third floor of a Montana boarding house when it caught fire. His left hand was burned so badly, the fingers fused into the palm as the skin healed. A year passed. The hand stayed that way. Keith asked his father to break it open and reset it. They gave him a bottle of whiskey and told him to drink until he passed out. His father cut the skin from wrist to fingers with a knife, laid the hand flat between two mink stretchers, bound the whole arm, and left it for 2 weeks. When the boards came off, the hand was straight. Keith learned to shoot with it. That is the man who decided American handguns were not powerful enough. His first published writing was a letter to American riflemen in 1924. His writing style was raw, and his editors worked it hard before it went to press. None of that slowed him down. By the time he found his subject, the revolver, the heavy bullet, the large bore, he was writing with the authority of a man who had tested his opinions in country that did not grade on a curve. He was not writing from a desk in a city. He was writing from a ranch house in Idaho with an elk rifle on the wall and 30 years of field experience behind every sentence. The argument Keith was making was simple. It was also, to most of the gun world in the 1930s, wrong. He believed the handgun could do serious work at serious distances, not the 30-foot distances of a gunfight. 100 yards, 200 yards, a wounded animal that has to be finished before dark, a bear that has not read the manual on stopping distance. Keith's position was that the handguns of his era were underpowered by design, built around what was comfortable, not around what was necessary. He spent 2 decades trying to get someone to build something better. The .357 Magnum came first. Keith was one of the men who pushed for it. Winchester and Remington brought it out in 1935. Keith shot it, tested it, and wrote about it. And then he kept pushing. Because the .357 was not what he wanted, it was a step. What he wanted was heavier and bigger. A cartridge that could anchor a deer at 100 yards, stop a bear at a bad angle, and give the man holding it something the animal could not walk away from. For 20 years, he hand-loaded his way toward it. Heavy .44 caliber bullets were pushed to velocities the existing .44 Special could not safely reach. He shot these loads at game, at steel, from measured distances, and wrote down what happened. He was not guessing. He had the results in front of him. Month after month, he made the case in print, with specific animals, specific distances, specific outcomes. The gun press largely ignored him. The market had not asked for what he was building toward. Keith made the case anyway. In 1955, he got what he had been asking for. Smith & Wesson and Remington brought out the .44 Magnum, the most powerful production handgun cartridge in the world. The first production revolver off the line went to Elmer Keith. He was 56 years old. He had been making the case for 20 years. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the real history behind the guns that shaped America, subscribe now. You are exactly who this channel is for. Keith did not win because he was right. He won because he refused to stop. The gun press was not waiting for the .44 Magnum. The market had not been asking for it. The conventional wisdom said what Keith wanted was excessive, the kind of thing only a man who had spent too much time in the backcountry with his opinions would demand. Keith wrote the counter-argument every month in print for 30 years. He documented specific animals at specific distances and specific results. There was nobody else doing what he did. The men who wrote about handguns in those years wrote about service calibers, about target shooting, about what the police carried. Keith was writing about what happened when you actually needed a handgun to solve a problem that was not going to wait. If you carry a .44 Magnum today, or a .357 Magnum, or any of the heavy revolver cartridges that followed, understand that the cartridge in that gun was not inevitable. It existed because one man decided the available answer was not good enough, and he spent the better part of his career making the case until someone built it. Keith died on February 14, 1984, in Salmon, Idaho. He was 84 years old. There was a revolver on the wall. He had written until the end. He never softened. The opinions that made him difficult to ignore were the same opinions he carried out of that boarding house in 1911, with a hand that should not have worked, and a conviction that the tools around him were not good enough. The .44 Magnum is still in production. Still carried in Alaska by men who need to know it will work. Still the cartridge every subsequent big-bore revolver is compared against. Carried today by men who have never read a word he wrote. Men who will never know his name, but who carry his argument in their holster every time they walk into country that does not forgive a cartridge that is merely adequate. He did not need them to know it. He just needed it to be true, and it was.